They say that vengeance is a poison that seeps into your veins and consumes you from within. Perhaps that's true. But when the world offers you no justice, what choice remains? Hey you! Welcome to Cupidoops, where love and logic are officially divorced, and chaos has full custody. Like and subscribe. Chaos begins. I stood in the darkened chamber, the air thick with the scent of burnt herbs and old rot. Faint candlelight twisted the shadows, making the walls writhe like living things. A cracked mirror faced me, its jagged edges mocking the last remnants of the woman I once was. Lyricelle Duskbane, daughter of a disgraced noble house, the girl who watched her father dragged to the gallows, his name spat upon like filth, the girl who clutched her mother's trembling hands as the doors of their crumbling estate were kicked open, the girl who ran until her feet bled, until the echoes of her family's screams were all that remained. But Lyricelle is dead. Once the ritual begins, Cytherean Greythorn's rasping voice broke the silence. There will be no return. His skeletal fingers traced ancient symbols into the stone floor, glowing faintly with a sickly blue light. The rogue alchemist was a wretched thing, thin as a crow and twice as cruel, but even he seemed reluctant to meet my eyes, as though he feared the resolve that burned within them. I understand, I said. The words tasted like iron. I had traded the last of my gold for this moment of forbidden ritual, whispered about in the underbelly of ruined kingdoms. Skin-changing, they called it. A curse. A blessing. Both. With it, I would cast aside the face that bore my family's shame. The flames roared to life. They licked the air in hues of violet and gold, searing the edges of the symbols beneath me. Heat swallowed the room, and the pain came swiftly. It tore through my body like 1,000 burning knives. My skin twisted, stretched as though it could no longer bear to hold the past. But I did not scream. I saw my father's execution, my mother's lifeless eyes, my brother's body left to rot in the mud. I felt their hands on mine, urging me forward. Endure. And so I did. When the flames died, I stumbled to the mirror. For a moment, fear clawed at me. Had I survived? Was I still myself? But the woman who stared back was a stranger. Pale, porcelain skin. Hair that cascaded in waves of gold, streaked with silver like the edge of a dagger. Lips red as spilled wine. And the eyes no longer the soft brown of Lyricelle Duskbane, but a striking shade of emerald. Sharp, ruthless. I touched my reflection. Gone was the fragile, broken girl. In her place stood someone who could command a room without uttering a word. A woman who could seduce kings and deceive devils. Selvareth Ebenvale. The name slipped from my lips like a promise. You have your face, Cytherean rasped, though I could see the flicker of unease in his gaze. But remember, beauty alone will not win you the heart of a prince. The heart of a prince. Yes, that was the final piece. The court of Knightspire awaited. Its nobles would whisper, their jealous tongues quick to spin their tales. But none of them would see the storm I carried within me. None would guess why I had come. And Prince Valorian Knightspire, the cold prince, would be no exception. They called him untouchable. A man of ice, unmoved by beauty and unyielding in his silence. They said no woman could thaw him. But they did not know me. I would make him mine. I would slip into his guarded world, wrap my hands around the walls he had built, and tear them down piece by piece. And when the time was right, when he no longer saw the dagger behind my smile, I would ruin him. I would ruin them all. For revenge was no longer a poison in my veins. It was the only thing keeping me alive. The air in Madame Isolde of Exthorn's academy was thick with perfume, a cloying sweetness that masked the bitter truths traded within these walls. Velvet drapes bled crimson shadows across the room, and gold-framed mirrors reflected more than just beauty. They captured power, the kind that whispered through the corridors of kingdoms and shattered thrones. I had been warned of this place. To step through her doors is to forsake your innocence, Cytherean had said. She'll teach you how to wield desire like a weapon. But make no mistake, she takes her pound of flesh. Yet what did I have left to lose? I stood before the grand gilded doors, my hands trembling only slightly. The woman I had become, Selvareth Ebenvale, could not afford the weakness that Lyricelle once wore like a shroud. I lifted my chin, steadying my breath. The guards flanking the entrance eyed me with curiosity. Let them stare. They would see only the porcelain beauty I had paid for. They would never glimpse the ruin that lingered beneath. With a nod, one guard pushed the door open. The world inside was opulence incarnate. Golden chandeliers bathed the room in a soft, decadent glow. Silk-draped lounges were adorned with women clad in jewels and temptation. They laughed, their voices like silk ribbons, but there was something calculated in their every movement. Each glance, each flutter of lashes intentional. At the center of it all, lounging like a queen without a crown, was Madame Isolde of Exthorn. She was striking, even beneath the veil of years that lined her face. Her hair, the color of spilled ink, was pinned high with ruby-studded combs. A crimson gown, tight at the waist and scandalously bare at the shoulders, clung to her like sin. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were silver, piercing, unforgiving. "Selvareth Ebenvale," she purred, her voice like velvet over steel. "Or should I call you by the name you left behind?" I did not flinch. "Lyricelle Duskbane is dead." A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Is she?" For a moment, the weight of my past threatened to resurface. My father's pleading eyes, my mother's trembling hands, the jeering crowds, but I smothered the memories beneath the stone-cold mask I had forged. "She is," I answered, my voice steady. Madame Isolde's laughter echoed through the room, low and rich. "Good. The dead have no use for vengeance." She leaned forward, her gaze slicing through me. "But you, my darling, you burn with it." I said nothing. There was no point in denying the obvious. "I've trained queens and courtesans alike," she continued. "Women who've bent kings to their will. Some came for power, others for escape. But you," her eyes narrowed. "You come for blood." My heart pounded. Even with all I had endured, there were few who saw through me so easily. Yet Isolde seemed to peel away my layers without so much as a touch. "I came to learn," I replied, "and I am prepared to pay whatever price you demand." Another laugh. "Oh, you will. But first, we shall see if you are worthy." The lessons began that very night. "A woman's beauty may draw the eye," Madame Isolde said, pacing the mirrored room with predatory grace. "But beauty alone is fleeting. What you must learn, my darling, is control." She circled me like a hawk, her silver eyes gleaming with challenge. "Every movement you make must have purpose. Every glance, every word a weapon. You will not simply capture their attention, you will enslave it." She tapped her slender fingers against my chin, forcing me to meet my reflection. "And it begins here. Tell me, what do you see?" I hesitated. The face in the mirror was flawless, yes, but perfection alone did not satisfy Isolde. "I see a woman who knows what she wants," I answered carefully, "and who will stop at nothing to take it." A flicker of approval crossed her face. "Better, but not enough." She stepped behind me, her fingers brushing over my shoulders, correcting the slightest slouch. "Confidence is not only felt at a scene. Posture, presence. You do not ask for power. You demand it." I lifted my chin, straightened my back, and for the first time I saw it. Not just the beauties Itherian had given me, but the dangerous allure that lingered beneath. "She awakens," Isolde murmured. Days turned to weeks. The lessons grew harsher. I learned to move with deliberate elegance, to speak in a voice that lured men closer without them realizing why. The art of the smile, one that hinted at untold secrets. The touch that lingered just long enough to spark desire. But it was not seduction alone that Isolde taught me. "Words are a woman's sharpest blade," she instructed one evening, her wine-dark lips curling into a smirk. "And the sharpest blade draws no blood." She had me study the tongues of foreign courts, the politics of kingdoms, the subtle games of manipulation that thrived beneath the surface of civility. "Men will offer you their hearts," she said, "but it is their secrets you must claim." And I did. Each lesson stripped away the remnants of Lyricelle Duskbane. I became a shadow among shadows, weaving false smiles and careful whispers. They called me Selvareth Ebenvale, the silver-haired beauty, who danced through the arms of noblemen yet slipped through their grasp like smoke. But beneath the silk and perfume, my resolve remained unyielding. I saw Valorian Nightspire's face in my mind, the cold prince, untouchable and feared. They whispered that no woman could melt his heart. They would see. I did not come to beg for his affection. I came to shatter his world, and when the time was right, I would watch the crown of Nightspire crumble. The gates of Nightspire Palace loomed before me, a fortress of gleaming obsidian, its jagged towers clawing at the sky like ancient beasts. Even the air tasted colder here. The lingering shadows that draped the palace whispered secrets of power and ruin, and I would weave my own among them. I stepped from the gilded carriage, the hem of my sapphire gown spilling onto the polished stone. The fabric hugged my frame like water, designed to accentuate and conceal in equal measure. Madame Isoldra's words echoed through my mind. Let them crave you, but never let them touch what they desire. Guards stood at attention, their spears gleaming under the torchlight. Beyond them, laughter and music spilled from the grand hall, a court drenched in false delight. But even amidst the revelry I could feel it, the presence that eclipsed all others. Prince Valorian Nightspire. I had never seen him in person, yet the stories painted him well. A ruler forged from ice and steel. It was said he had never once smiled since taking the throne, that he ruled with logic, not warmth. But even a heart of ice could shatter. A steward in crimson robes bowed low before me, his eyes lingering longer than they should. Lady Selvareth Ebonvale of the Ebonvale Isles, he announced, his voice carrying through the vast marble hall. The murmurs began instantly. I could feel their gazes, noble women with venom in their smiles, lords who measured beauty like coin. They whispered of my sudden appearance, of my name, polished and mysterious. Perfect. I took my place among the throng, each step deliberate. Heads turned, conversations faltered. I did not need to speak for the court to notice. But he did not. The crown prince, Valorian, stood upon the dais, his throne carved from black stone and silver. The light from the chandeliers spilled across his sharp features, high cheekbones, a strong jawline, and eyes the color of storm clouds. His silver hair, unbound, fell to his shoulders, regal, untouchable. And yet, even in stillness, he commanded the room. I had expected curiosity, perhaps a flicker of amusement at the unfamiliar face gracing his court. But Valorian's expression remained unreadable. His gaze did not wander. It did not soften. He is colder than they say, but that only made the game more enticing. Lady Selvareth. A voice dripped with forced charm. Lord Lyricelle Duskbane, the cousin who had betrayed my family. His presence twisted my stomach, but I offered a flawless smile. The court is most fortunate to have you among us. Fortunate? No. They would come to see me as their ruin. Fortune favors those who seize it, I replied, letting the slightest tilt of my chin challenge him. His smile faltered. Good. The mere sight of me unsettled him. Let him fear. But it was not Lord Syrian I had come for. The first dance was called. A gilded string quartet played, and the nobles took their places. Lord after lord approached me, offering practiced smiles and empty compliments. I let them twirl me across the floor, feigning delight. Yet I felt the weight of his presence, unmoving, observing. Then, as the music swelled, I allowed the moment I had waited for. A stumble small, deliberate. A gasp. My hand reached for balance, brushing against the chest of my latest dance partner. Gasps echoed, whispers swirled. But I cared not for their gossip, because at last the prince's eyes were upon me. The music slowed. Valorian's gaze locked with mine, and the hall seemed to quiet. There was no curiosity in his expression, no spark of desire, only scrutiny. He sees through the mask, and yet he did not look away. The prince rose from his throne. The crowd parted for him like waves before a ship. Every step he took was deliberate, his dark robes trailing behind him. When he stood before me, the very air grew heavier. Lady Selvareth, he said, his voice low and commanding. The sound of it stirred something within me, not fear, but the undeniable thrill of the game beginning. Your Highness! I curtsied, the silk of my gown pooling around me. Forgive my clumsiness. It seems your court's beauty has left me quite distracted. A dangerous thing to say. But I did not flinch. His gaze remained unyielding. Distraction is a weakness, Lady Ebenvale. Only for those who succumb to it. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, annoyance. I could not be certain. But he did not walk away. "The next dance," he said simply, extending his hand. The court stilled. The prince never danced. But I took his hand without hesitation. The music began anew, the strings trembling with anticipation. His touch was cold, yet his grip was firm. He led, and I followed. Every step was precise, a wordless battle of control. "Why have you come to my court, Lady Ebenvale?" His voice was low enough that only I could hear. "To see the heart of Nightspire," I answered, "and to decide whether it is as cold as they say." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a tone that could chill the sun itself, he replied, "Careful, my lady. Some hearts are cold not because they lack warmth, but because they have been frozen for far too long." And as the dance came to its end, I could not help but wonder, was I truly the hunter? Or had I stepped willingly into the jaws of a beast far more dangerous than I had imagined? The scent of burning cedar lingered in the grand halls of Nightspire Palace, its embers crackling within golden sconces. The laughter from the ballroom had faded, yet the echoes of the evening still clung to the air. The nobles whispered of the dance of Prince Valorian's rare indulgence in the arms of a stranger. But I was no stranger. Not any more. I traced my fingertips along the velvet-lined walls as I moved through the dim corridors. Each step was careful, deliberate. The cold marble beneath my heels was a reminder of where I stood, the heart of the Empire's power. And the prince's eyes had not yet left my thoughts. He had not smiled, nor had he uttered a word of praise. But the way he held me, the firm press of his palm against my waist, it was not indifference. No, the cold prince was not as untouchable as they believed. A weakness, no matter how well concealed. Yet even as I played the game, a shiver of caution trailed down my spine. Valorian Nightspire was not the only one I needed to watch. The court was a viper's nest, and already the snakes had begun to stir. "Quite the entrance you made tonight." The voice slithered from the shadows. I did not startle. I had grown accustomed to the darkness. Instead, I turned to face him, Lord Lyricelle Duskbane. His silver hair gleamed beneath the flickering light, and that thin, calculating smile clung to his face. "Lord Syrian," I greeted smoothly, though the sound of his name soured my tongue. I did not expect such interest in my presence. He stepped closer, the silk of his black cloak whispering along the stone. The court is always interested in what it does not understand. His gaze raked over me, lingering where it had no right to. "And you, Lady Selvareth, are a mystery." I held his gaze, unyielding. Mystery is but a mirror. It shows what others wish to see. A low chuckle, spoken like one who has much to hide. "If only you knew." Syrian's amusement did not last. His expression shifted, the shadows deepening in his eyes. "But I wonder, did you come here to play the fool for the court's amusement? Or do you seek something far greater?" He was testing me, fishing for answers, but I would give him none. "I seek only what every lady seeks," I said, the edges of my smile sharpening. "To enjoy the splendor of the court, to admire its rulers. And perhaps," he murmured, stepping even closer, "to find favor in the prince's eyes?" The accusation lingered like smoke, but I did not flinch. "It seems the court enjoys its gossip," I replied, tilting my chin. "But what the prince chooses to see in me is his own concern." Syrian's smile faltered. "Good." Without another word, I brushed past him, the echo of my footsteps fading into the darkened hall. My heart pounded, but not from fear. No, his games would not shake me. I had endured far worse. That night, the palace was still. The servants' torches burned low, casting twisted shadows that danced along the walls. Yet sleep did not come for me. I stood at the arched window of my chamber, the silver moon hanging low above the distant peaks. The sight was beautiful, but it was the darkness that beckoned me. Somewhere within these walls lay the truth of what Lyricelle Duskbane had done, the truth of the silent war that had consumed my family, and perhaps even the truth of the prince himself. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I turned, expecting a servant, but when I opened it, I found only a single folded parchment resting upon the floor. No seal, No signature, only a simple line of words scrawled in dark ink. Not all eyes are blind. Be wary, Lady Ebenvale. A warning. I scanned the shadows beyond the door, but the corridor remained empty. Whoever had left it was long gone. Yet the weight of their message clung to me. Not all eyes are blind. Had someone seen through my facade already? Or was this the beginning of another game? No matter. I would uncover the truth, piece by piece, for even the coldest hearts had cracks. And through those cracks I would slip. Let them whisper. Let them watch. The game had only just begun. The palace was alive with splendor. Golden chandeliers dripped with crystals that caught the candlelight, bathing the grand hall in a warm, deceptive glow. Silken banners of the night spire crest a silver raven, clutching a broken sword hung along the towering marble pillars. The illusion of grandeur was impeccable, but beneath the laughter and music, the shadows stirred. Tonight's banquet was held in honor of Prince Valorian's triumph at the northern borders, a victory that brought uneasy peace. Nobles raised gilded goblets in forced celebration, though their smiles held little joy. War was a costly affair, but for me, the cost had been far greater. The memory of my family's ruin clung to me like smoke. Lord Lyricelle Duskbane's betrayal, the death of my father, my mother's sorrow, and the endless whispers that followed. Every face in this room had played a part in that tragedy, whether through action or silence. Yet here I stood, a ghost they no longer recognized. Lady Selvareth. A voice like silk slithered through the crowd. Syrian. He approached with that same insincere charm, a golden goblet resting in his hand. I trust you've recovered from your stumble last night. I smiled. Your concern touches me, my lord, but I assure you I'm far from fragile. A thin smile pulled at his lips. So I see. He studied me, though I could sense the underlying irritation. My presence unsettled him. Every careful step I took, every calculated glance I offered the prince, chipped away at his composure. Good. Before he could speak further, the court's attention shifted. The great doors at the end of the hall groaned open, and the air seemed to tighten. Prince Valorian. He entered in a cloak of midnight, his silver hair falling like strands of moonlight against his sharp, regal features. The room bowed in unison. Even Syrian's ever-present smirk flickered with restraint. But it was the prince's eyes that held me captive. Cold, calculating. Yet beneath that icy exterior, there was something else. Something I couldn't yet name. He passed the nobles without pause, his strides purposeful. And though he never glanced in my direction, I felt the weight of his presence. He was aware of me, just as I wanted. The prince has not been so generous with his gaze in years, Syrian mused, his tone laced with thinly veiled disdain. It seems you've managed quite the feat. I met his gaze unbothered. A woman's presence is only as powerful as the secrets it conceals. His smile faded. And what secrets do you conceal, Lady Selvareth? I leaned in just enough to ensure only he could hear. Wouldn't you like to know? Before he could respond, the herald's voice boomed through the hall. Let the feast commence. Golden platters overflowed with roasted game and spiced wine, servants moving in practiced precision. Yet as the nobles indulged, I touched none of it. There were other appetites I sought to satiate. From my place near the lower end of the table I observed every exchange glance, every whisper conversation. The court was a labyrinth of schemes, and I intended to know every winding path. But one gaze, above all, found me. Across the hall, Prince Valorian remained silent, his goblet untouched. He spoke only when required, his responses curt and deliberate. Yet his eyes, storm-gray and unreadable, flickered toward me more than once. Was it curiosity? Suspicion? I couldn't be certain. And then, without warning, he stood. The room hushed. All eyes turned to him. Valorian's presence commanded silence as he lifted his goblet, the silver gleaming beneath the candlelight. To those who stand in the light, he began, his voice low yet resonant, and to those who linger in the shadows, may we all remember that even the darkest corners are not beyond the reach of consequence. A toast laced with meaning. Nobles murmured their agreement, raising their goblets. But I felt the prince's words for what they were a warning. Was it meant for the court, or for me? Later that evening, as the festivities waned, I slipped from the banquet hall and into the winding corridors of the palace. The shadows welcomed me, concealing my presence. But I was not alone. You move with purpose. The voice echoed softly, and from the shadows emerged Valorian himself. No guards. No advisors. Only the cold prince, his silver hair gleaming in the dim light. I did not flinch. And you follow without reason, your highness. His gaze lingered, as if searching for the threads of my deception. There is always a reason. The air thickened between us. His presence was suffocating, but I would not waver. I had endured the weight of sorrow far greater than any prince's scrutiny. You are no mere lady seeking favor, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I see it in your eyes. I held his gaze. Then what is it you see, your highness? A long pause. The storm within him churned, yet he gave no answer. Be careful, Lady Selvareth. His voice was softer now, yet no less commanding. This court is not kind to those who play dangerous games. And with that, he turned, vanishing into the shadows as swiftly as he had come. But his warning did not rattle me, because despite the prince's cold exterior, I had glimpsed at the flicker of intrigue. And I would fan that spark into a flame. The whispers would grow, the shadows would stir, and soon the cold prince would find himself ensnared. The moon had begun its descent, casting silver slivers of light through the towering windows of Knightspire Palace. The banquet's echoes still lingered in the hall's laughter, clinking goblets, the false merriment of nobles who wore their masks with practiced ease. But beneath the polished veneer of the court, the shadows shifted, and I, Selvareth Ebonvale, moved through them like a whisper. Valorian's words still lingered in my mind. A warning, but not one born of malice. No, the cold prince spoke with something far more dangerous: curiosity. And curiosity, when stirred, could break even the most stoic of resolves. I passed the gilded archways, my footsteps barely audible on the polished marble. The guards paid me little mind. A lady wandering the halls after a feast was no scandal. Not yet, but I had not ventured here without purpose. The banquet had yielded more than whispers. I had caught the fleeting glance between Lord Lyricelle Duskbane and a lesser noble Marquis Eladrin Farrow, a man whose loyalty was far too pliable. A debt-bound pawn in Syrian's ever-expanding game. The Marquis had slipped away not long after the prince's toast, and I, like a shadow, followed. I reached the eastern wing, where the air grew heavier, tinged with the dampness of forgotten corridors. Few dared to wander these halls, abandoned after the previous queen's death. A perfect place for secrets to fester. Torchlight flickered along the cracked stone walls as I approached the arched doorway. Beyond it, muted voices drifted through the silence. I stepped closer, remaining concealed within the shadows. You grow careless, Eladrin. Syrian's voice was as sharp as ever, though the edge of frustration curled beneath it. The prince watches too closely now. The Marquis stammered, his voice trembling. I did as you asked. The rumors are spreading. They whisper of a foreign temptress who schemes to beguile him. Temptress? How predictable. Syrian's low chuckle followed. And yet, the prince does not turn her away. Curious, isn't it? My nails bit into my palm. He was testing Valorian's resolve, pushing, prodding, waiting for the cold prince to crack. But it was not the prince's downfall Syrian sought. It was mine. You will continue as instructed, Syrian ordered. Keep the court's eyes on her. Should the prince favor her, the whispers will grow. He paused, his tone darkening. And if she becomes a threat? The Marquis hesitated. You mean to ruin her? A smile dripped from Syrian's words. No, dear Eladrin. Ruin is far too merciful. The weight of his words settled like frost. But I did not falter. They underestimated me. The shadows had taught me patience, how to listen, how to wait. And now, with their schemes laid bare, I held the advantage. I stepped away from the door, my pulse steady. The cold prince may have warned me, but it was not his protection I sought. It was a victory. The next morning, the palace stirred with the hum of courtly chatter. Sunlight streamed through the stained-glass windows of the Hall of Mirrors, illuminating the golden chamber where nobles gathered beneath the gleam of crystal chandeliers. I arrived with purpose, the crimson silk of my gown trailing behind me. Every gaze followed, some with curiosity, others with contempt. But I welcomed their scrutiny. Among them stood Lady Avelini Thornwind, the court's ever-watchful gossip. Her honeyed smile twisted as I passed. Lady Selvareth, she cooed, her voice dripping with false charm. I hear the prince was most captivated by your presence last night. A deliberate jab. I met her gaze, the hint of a smile playing at my lips. Captivated, perhaps, but a man's gaze is only the beginning of the game, is it not? Avellini faltered, her retort dying in her throat. I did not linger. There were far greater games to play. Hours passed, and the court's whispers grew louder. But as the sun dipped low, the chill of the evening set in. I found myself within the prince's private wing, the corridors lined with tapestries of ancient battles and forgotten kings. A summons had come, one I could not ignore. The chamber doors loomed before me. 2 guards stood watch, their stoic expressions unchanging, as they pulled the heavy doors open. Inside, the prince awaited. Valorian stood near the hearth, the golden flames casting shadows along his sharp features. He did not wear the grand armor of courtly affairs, but a simple dark tunic, the silver embroidery glinting beneath the dim light. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was taut like a blade held at the ready. You move through the court with purpose, he said at last, his voice low. Yet the court moves with whispers. Some call you a temptation, others a threat. I did not flinch. And what do you call me, your highness? He stepped closer, the storm in his gaze unwavering. I have not yet decided. The prince's scrutiny bore into me, searching for the cracks I had so carefully concealed. But I met his gaze without fear. You are unlike the others, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. They crave power. Yet you crave something far more dangerous. The words lingered. For a heartbeat, I wondered if he saw the truth, the hunger for vengeance that burned beneath my polished facade. But before I could respond, he spoke once more. Be wary, Lady Selvareth. His tone darkened, for even the most practiced masks will slip, and when they do, the court will devour what remains. He left me with those parting words, the echo of his presence lingering. But what the cold prince did not understand, what none of them understood, was that I had no intention of wearing this mask forever. Soon they would see the face that lay beneath. The court was alive with whispers. Like dry leaves in the wind, they scattered through the marble corridors and gilded chambers, brushing past guards and noble women, lingering beneath the crystal chandeliers. And at the center of it all stood the cold Prince Valorian, unreadable as ever. But I, Selvareth Ebenvale, had learned to read the silent language of power. Every glance, every subtle twitch of his jaw, spoke volumes. The court believed they held the reins of this game, but they had grown careless. And now it was my turn. The tension thickened as the grand hall filled. Valorian's court was never without its audience, but today the air was charged. The Council of Lords had convened, their presence a testament to the importance of the gathering. The prince stood at the head of the chamber, his commanding presence amplified by the steel-blue velvet of his robes. Behind him, the towering banners of House Nightspire bore the sigil of the raven, a symbol of shadow and silence. I remained at the edge of the hall, careful to keep my mask in place. After all, no lady seeking the favor of the prince should appear too bold. But I was not merely seeking his favor. I was dismantling the pieces one by one. Lord Lyricelle Duskbane. Valorian's voice cut through the murmurs. You requested this audience. Speak. Syrian's steps echoed as he approached the center. His pale, calculating features twisted with feigned humility. My prince, he began, bowing low. I come with a grave concern, one that threatens the stability of the crown. I already knew what words would follow. Syrian's ploys were no longer a mystery. He had grown impatient, reckless, and now, like a beast sensing blood, he was ready to strike. The Lady Selvareth, he continued, his voice laced with just enough false regret. It is no secret that her arrival has stirred the court. Rumors claim she has ensnared your favor. Some say through charm, others through darker means. A ripple of murmurs followed. Eyes turned to me, expectation thickening the air. But I did not flinch. Valorian's gaze never wavered. Rumors are the weapons of cowards, Syrian. I trust you would not waste this court's time without evidence. Syrian's lips curled. Evidence, your highness. It is the whispers that become poison. The people begin to question. They wonder if the prince who upholds the honor of the realm has fallen prey to foreign manipulation. His words struck with careful intent. A lesser woman might have cowered beneath such accusations. But I was not a lesser woman. I was the storm they failed to predict. Your Highness, I spoke, stepping forward with measured grace. May I speak? The court stilled. Syrian's eyes narrowed, but I did not give him the satisfaction of acknowledgement. Valorian's gaze locked with mine. Proceed. I curtsied, every motion deliberate. It is true that I am a foreigner, and it is true that I have been fortunate to stand within your presence. But to suggest that I have used deceit to earn that honor. My voice lowered, edged with a feigned vulnerability. I find such accusations wounding. The murmurs grew. I saw the flickers of uncertainty in the crowd. Doubt, a powerful weapon when wielded with precision. But perhaps Lord Syrian is correct in one regard. I continued, my tone softening. The court has long been bound by tradition. The unfamiliar often breeds suspicion. And I, unlike many here, am not bound by blood to the crown. The weight of my words settled. Syrian's smile faltered. But I would ask the court this. My gaze swept the chamber. When did lineage alone define loyalty? A calculated pause. Let them question. Let them wonder. I stand before you not as a woman seeking to manipulate, I said, my voice unwavering, but as one who believes in the strength of this realm. And if my presence is seen as a threat, then I will bear that burden with dignity. The silence was deafening. Even Syrian seemed momentarily disarmed. Valorian, however, remained unmoved. Well spoken, he said at last, his voice low. But words alone do not sway the tides. A challenge, but one I had long anticipated. My prince, I replied, lowering my gaze in careful submission. Then I asked for the chance to prove my intentions. Let my actions speak where words may fail. A dangerous gamble, but the most rewarding games always were. That evening, as the court dispersed and the embers of tension still glowed, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. Valorian's summons came not long after. The prince's private study was a stark contrast to the gilded grandeur of the palace. Dark oak shelves lined the walls, filled with tomes bound in cracked leather. The scent of aged parchment mingled with the lingering warmth of the hearth. He stood with his back to me, the amber light catching the sharp lines of his profile. You play the court well, he said, his voice low. But every move comes with consequence. I stepped closer, though not too close. And yet, Your Highness, it was you who gave me the opportunity to speak. Tell me, was it curiosity or something more? He turned, his storm-gray eyes locked on mine. You speak of loyalty, he said, but I see the calculation behind your words. There are secrets you guard, and one day, Lady Selvareth, I will uncover them. A thrill coursed through me. The game had turned. But what Valorian did not yet know, what no one knew, was that I had long since set the pieces in motion. And when the final move came, there would be no doubt whose victory it would be. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting its silver glow across the spires of the palace. Beneath its cold gaze, the final act of this treacherous game had begun. I stood before the mirror, the silk of my obsidian gown pooling around my feet like spilled ink. Jewels gleamed at my throat, but they were mere ornaments. Tonight, my weapon was far more dangerous, the truth. Lady Selvareth, the attendant murmured as she adjusted the last golden pin in my dark hair. The council has convened. His Highness awaits. I met my own reflection. Gone was the frightened girl who had clawed her way from the shadows. In her place stood a woman who had endured agony, learned the whispers of seduction, and woven her name into the halls of power. Tonight, it would all come to fruition. The council chamber was a grand hall of towering marble columns, their polished surfaces reflecting the flickering torchlight. Lords and ladies lined the room, their faces painted with false concern and veiled curiosity. And at the head of it all, Prince Valorian Knight Spire. He sat upon the throne of dark iron, the sigil of the raven etched into the high backrest. His silver-gray eyes, cold and unforgiving, searched the crowd. Lady Selvareth, Valorian's voice rang clear, commanding the room's attention. You have been summoned to answer the accusations brought forth by Lord Lyricelle Duskbane. He claims that you have manipulated your way into this court, seeking power through deceit. The words should have stung. Once, they might have, but now, I merely smiled. Your Highness, I said, lowering my head in a show of respect. I stand before you with no fear, for the truth has always been my ally. Syrian stepped forward, his polished smile gleaming beneath the dim light. Truth, he echoed, his voice dripping with mockery. A bold claim for a woman whose origins remained shrouded in mystery. The court murmured. I could feel the weight of their curiosity, their judgment. But I was not here to defend. I was here to end it. Lord Syrian speaks of manipulation. I began, my voice steady. But is it not manipulation to twist the court with false claims? Is it not deceit to hunger for power beneath the pretense of loyalty? Syrian stiffened, his composure faltering. Good. I came to this court seeking neither title nor riches, I continued, my gaze never leaving his. But vengeance! Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even Valorian's expression shifted a flicker of intrigue. My name was not always Selvareth Ebenvale, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. I was born Lyricelle Duskbane, the daughter of a once noble house, cast into ruin by the hands of those who stood in this very chamber. Recognition flashed across Syrian's face. For the first time, fear shadowed his eyes. You thought the past was buried, I said, my voice cold. But the dead do not rest so easily. I stepped forward, the silence suffocating. The accusations against me were never about morality. They were about control. You feared what I might uncover. And now, your fear has become your downfall. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Irinder Valencrest, my most loyal ally. He bore with him the sealed documents, proof of Syrian's betrayal, his conspiracy against the crown, and his secret dealings with the enemy kingdoms. Valorian rose from his throne, the weight of revelation crashing down. Is this true, Syrian? My prince, Syrian stammered, his composure crumbling. These are lies, forged to ruin me. But the evidence spoke louder than any plea. The guards seized him without hesitation. Later that night, in the quiet of the prince's study, Valorian stood before me. The flames of the hearth cast golden shadows across his sharp features. You played your hand well, he said, his voice low. But the question remains, was it for vengeance alone? I stepped closer, the air between us thick with unspoken tension. I once believed revenge would be enough. But now I see the game has changed. His eyes searched mine, the storm within them still raging. And what is your next move, Selvareth? A slow smile curved my lips. That, I whispered, depends entirely on you. The final move had been made. The kingdom rejoiced beneath a sky of gold and violet. Banners bearing the sigil of the raven unfurled from the highest towers of the palace, swaying with the breeze. Bells rang through the capital, their joyous chimes echoing the triumph of a union that none had dared to predict. I stood in the grand hall, draped in a gown of deepest crimson, a color once feared, now revered. Embroidered vines of black silk traced the fabric like creeping shadows, while diamonds gleamed at my throat. But it was not the dress, nor the jewels that held the court captive. It was me. The whispers had begun the moment the announcement was made. The prince had chosen the serpent of the court. The cold-hearted sovereign had taken the woman who brought lords to ruin. But none dared to utter such words before me now. For I had won. At the end of the aisle, beneath the stained glass arch that bathed the hall in shades of sapphire and gold, stood Valorian Nightspire. Regal in his obsidian cloak and silver-gilded armor, he watched me with those storm-gray eyes that had once seemed so distant. But now, they burned with something far more dangerous. Devotion. As I reached him, the hush that had fallen over the court grew heavier. Valorian extended his hand, his touch firm and unyielding. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Lady Selvareth Ebenvale, his voice rumbled, filling the vast chamber. Do you stand before me of your own will? I do. My voice was steady, the weight of my past no longer binding me. And do you vow to rule by my side with strength and honor? My gaze did not falter. With strength and honor, I vow. The high priest lowered the ceremonial crown of black steel and sapphire, its spires twisting like darkened flames. Valorian lifted it with reverence, his fingers brushing against my hair as he placed it upon my head. The weight of it was not a burden. It was a triumph. Then, by the will of the realm, the priest declared, I pronounce you husband and wife, king and queen of Nightspire. The court erupted into thunderous applause, but the sound barely registered. Valorian's hand remained in mine, his thumb tracing the delicate ridge of my knuckles. He pulled me closer, his lips brushing against my ear. "You are no longer the shadow of a ruined house," he murmured. "You are my queen." "And you," I whispered in return, "are no longer the cold prince." He smiled, a rare, dangerous thing. "No, but for you, I will always be the man who burned the past to build a future." That night, beneath a sky painted with stars, we stood upon the palace balcony. The people of Nightspire cheered below, their torches glowing like scattered embers. But I saw none of it, only him. "My vengeance brought me to you," I said, my fingers brushing the cool metal of his crown. "And now," he cupped my face, his touch reverent, "now we rule. Together." The kingdom whispered of a queen who had risen from ruin, and a king whose heart had thawed beneath her touch. But they did not know the full truth. This was not merely a tale of vengeance or seduction. It was a story of power, a power earned, a power shared. And in the shadows of our triumph I smiled, for the final move had been made and the game was mine. Comment, like, and subscribe.